Welcome to Words with Witte. I am your host, Anna Witte, and I created this podcast to chat with people who have inspiring stories. We'll talk about how they got started in their respective careers to where they are now and all of the good and the bad in between. So this week's guest on the show is the founder of Payball Sports. He is also a fellow Penn Stater, which is also always fun to have on this show. Pete Makover didn't create his business in the most conventional way, but always had a desire for entrepreneurship and following his passions. His light bulb moment didn't come until he was further in his career, but luckily that didn't hinder him from taking a chance on himself. And also during his time at Penn State, he was the captain of the men's lacrosse team and is still heavily involved in the program in a unique way. So with that, Pete, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. Really excited to speak with you, Anna. Thanks for having me.
Of course. How are you doing? How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been good. We were just talking right before we started this. I had a sports injury and I was watching your podcast, wishing I had access to the guy, Mike, I think, that you just had your podcast with in sports medicine, playing spike ball against my high school kids. And I sprained my calf and now I'm wearing a boot, which is just pathetic. My wife and I both played sports in college. We both played lacrosse in college. So we think of ourselves as athletic, but I think we've hit that pivot point now where our high school kids can actually beat us. And it's, we're trying to take that in and accept it and celebrate that as a positive, but we're fairly competitive. So it's hard to do.
Right. So I like starting this podcast off with just getting to know our guest. And my favorite question to ask is, what did you study in school and what were your plans and your dreams for yourself and for your career?
Yeah, well, so my major was economics and international business, which is a bit of a mouthful. I think what really drew me into the international business piece of it was it was a 4.5-year major where you get to spend a semester abroad. That was one of the requirements. And to me, travel and adventure, around travel has always been a theme of an interest and a passion of mine throughout my life. So that really caught my attention. And I think nowadays, if you were an athlete at a D1 school, you probably don't even have the option to do this. But back when I was playing in the mid-90s, I couldn't have done it during a regular 4 years of playing, but my plan was to be able to go abroad a semester afterwards. So that kind of worked out. It kind of didn't. I actually had to take a medical red shirt for injuring my back. So speaking of injuries, I injured my back in my senior year and took a medical red shirt. Things got a little bit went off kilter a little bit, but I did get to go abroad, and then I came back for a very final semester to be able to play my last year. But I think the international component was something I always wanted to get involved with and pursue. I don't think in college I really had a master plan of what I want to do with my career. But what did happen through that is I did get an internship. My brother, Rich, who we'll probably talk about later when we talk about how we're still involved with the alumni program. But my older brother got a job in Hong Kong and actually got me an internship at Avon, big company. And that experience was kind of a life-changing pivotal point in my life where just getting to live in another place for the whole summer. First time I was kind of pulled into the corporate world, and first time I really got involved in doing computer programming, which was what my job was, using really just my one class that I took in computer programming as part of a business student. And everything clicked, and that kind of set me on my path with career.
So you kind of knew that initially you wanted to stay corporate and then maybe pivot later on in your career.
Yeah, I don't think the entrepreneurial concept had really struck me in college yet. That would come soon. But something in business. I knew I wanted to pursue something in business.
So I know we spoke earlier about your family's legacy at Penn State and kind of what that's meant to you and how that's carried on to your experience with the lacrosse team. But why did you choose Penn State, and kind of also what was your experience on the men's lacrosse team there?
Yeah. So my choice for Penn State was fairly easy. So as you just mentioned, right? So my older brother, 6 years older than me, Rich Makover, he went to Penn State to play lacrosse and was captain there. Then my sister, who's also older, between the two of us, she went to Penn State as well. So, somewhere around 10th grade, I started, being allowed to visit there and stay there, with them in their apartments or dorms and going out and seeing what the college experience is like as a 10th grader. I don't need to tell you, it's kind of hard to go to Penn State and not have a great time. So that was already my kind of bar that I knew, all right, something has to be as good as this. When it came time for applying to colleges, it was really actually very simple for me. I mean, nowadays, I actually have a daughter who's a rising senior starting to do the college applications. And, there's a lot of schools that she's thinking about. I had about 2 or 3. And I decided my strategy was I'm going to swing for the fences. And if I don't, and the fences is in Harvard. And if I don't get in, using lacrosse, I was hopeful that might help me. I didn't have the grades to get in by myself, but hoping that would work out. And if it didn't, I was like, look, if that doesn't work out, I know I want to go to Penn State. And as you can tell, I didn't get into Harvard, so I went to Penn State. And it was fantastic. I mean, really, I don't think I know anybody that's been to Penn State that isn't passionate about it. It was a wonderful experience, both, from every aspect, right? It was fun. It was a fantastic education. The lacrosse experience is probably the thing that will stick with me the most throughout my life. And it was just wonderful.
Yeah. And I also just the alumni connection that people talked about before I went there. I didn't really know what that meant until I left school. And, my friends from high school or whatever were just talking about, getting jobs and how, it was difficult. And I was like, I've reached out to maybe 3 or 4 Penn Staters, and within the, day 2, I'd get an email back just wanting to connect or wanting to help in any way. And yeah, that's something that we'll have for the rest of our lives, which is just so special and unique.
I honestly don't think, and I say this somewhat objectively, although I recognize I can't be completely objective since I'm a Penn Stater.
Yeah.
But somewhat objectively from what I've seen from my own peer group, right? And now I've been on both sides of the fence. I've been needing help, and I've been the one giving help. And I have not seen any alumni network nearly as powerful and widespread and passionate as the Penn State Alumni Network. I don't think I really appreciated that until I started getting involved with Payball, which I think we'll get into in a little bit. But absolutely, it's a force to be reckoned with in a very good way.
Oh, for sure. And people love to give me a hard time saying I'm part of a cult, but I'm here for it. A little
bit, but it's okay. Yeah,
it's a great cult. I mean, everyone should be a part of it. I begged my sister to go to Penn State, but that didn't happen. That's okay. So after graduating from Penn State, actually, let's talk about your lacrosse experience first, and how you came to become, the captain of the team, and what you learned and grew during your time at Penn State as a lacrosse player, as a captain.
Yeah, it was, that was really, that was my identity. Not the captain piece, but playing on the team, being an athlete, as so many college athletes, I think probably can relate to, right? That is how I perceive myself. I was a college athlete and a student athlete. But, it was really, and I think you hear every athlete say this too, it was really all about the relationships. I loved playing. I loved competing. I loved the process, the daily practices and working hard, the challenges, the physical component to it. I loved all of that. But really at the end of the day, 100% about the relationships. I loved my teammates. I loved being part of that team. And I think you can see that reflected in your teammate back at you, right? That we are all in that together. And I think that's something that's universal and timeless. And it's a really powerful thing to be a part of.
Right. Yeah. Can echo that as well. So after you graduated from Penn State, where did you take your first job?
So with PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is a big consulting firm. Again, so that internship with Avon that I mentioned, where I did computer software type of programming, really set me on this kind of path, realizing when I started looking for a job, saying, I want something like that. I didn't really know what was out there. Through some personal networking and talking to people, started realizing that, well, a bunch of the consulting firms, they have armies of college grads that they employ, that they train up in software, in management consulting, to kind of go to their clients and help them be, a whole new force to come in there and supplement their own staff. So I went there. The great learning experience. Some probably still to this day, some of the smartest people I've ever worked with. I'm still really good friends with a couple of them too, that we were in the trenches together. But just an impressive group of people, the caliber. And I learned a ton, and it's stuff that I still leverage today. At the same time, it did not fit. I really struggled. I was there for 3 years. And just from a personal fulfillment perspective, it just didn't click with me. And I really was not happy with the experience. Although in hindsight, I look back saying, well, it was probably one of the best experiences I could have possibly had.
Right. What didn't click for you?
It was a grind, right? I mean, a lot of entry level jobs, right? You're going to be working really hard hours. You're going to be, not really thought of as a human, as opposed to somebody to do something, get something done. I think that was the part that really weighed on me. It didn't have this sense of fulfillment and creativity, and I think that's where maybe I started. That's where it first started stirring in my mind about wanting to be my own boss, wanting to be able to have more creativity in my job, realizing I have a bit more of an entrepreneurial spirit than sticking strictly with corporate. And it would take me years to get there, but I think that's where the first stirrings started to happen. I remember I had a good friend of mine, another guy named Rich, who we were on projects together, and he'd sit there every day just kind of brainstorming on what could we do? What if we had a company that did this? What if we had a company that did that? And it was all fantasy. Neither of us pulled the trigger, but that was the first beginnings of that.
So you were there for 3 years, and then I know you quit your job, your corporate work with PwC. Did you have anything lined up, or was this doesn't work for me? I have savings where I can figure out my next steps once I'm done here.
That's the luxury of when you're young, with no mortgage, nothing tying you down or anything. Like, you have this flexibility. So I just quit and did not have a plan. In fact, so my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, was in grad school at Columbia in the city. So we were living in the city. And so she had her summers off. And so we timed it where I stopped my job somewhere late spring to align with her rolling off of her school year. And we got in the car and spent 3 months driving cross country around the country in a tent, backpacking, hitting all the national parks. And it was to this day one of the best experiences I've ever had. And one of my goals was saying, I need to get away. I need to kind of recenter and think about what I want to do. And I was probably all over the place in the spectrum of what I was considering, everything from non-corporate to do I stick with where I land. When we got back, though, it was time to go, okay, face reality. She had to go back to school. I had to get a job. And I think, I didn't have any kind of major epiphanies of something radically different. But what I did do is I ended up sticking with my skill set of, software engineering and management consulting. I think the term people would use. But I went independent, and I became self-employed and a contractor who could be hired by companies to do that. And I did that for the next 3 years, and realized that was the piece that was missing for me. There was something about being my own boss and being in control of my own destiny that made all the difference for me. Saying I don't mind doing the work. The work is actually, it makes me, it kind of clicks and it makes me tick. I get up in the morning kind of thinking about what am I going to do, and that was a good thing. But it was this sense of I'm in control. I'm not at the whim of somebody who doesn't know me saying, show up in this state next week, and you're gonna be working crazy hours and maybe come home for the weekend, maybe not.
Right. I know you were young at the time, but how did you afford that in New York City to kind of be your own consultant, or what did that look like? Well,
the consulting, the compensation for consulting was actually quite good. So that part actually was fine. Yeah, I guess it raised the ante of if I didn't get employed and I was on my own, that was my responsibility to find employment. And if I didn't, then we would have run into trouble really quickly living in Manhattan. But luckily that didn't happen. It didn't play out that way.
Yeah, no, I mean New York is an expensive place, and I'm sure you knew that when you took that gamble too. It almost probably made you fight. I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but fight for clients and make sure you.
Yeah, I think, I guess if I look back, I think I lucked out a little bit that I didn't have to face that while we were living. I do remember when we moved out of the city, having a period of a month or two, that happens when you're an independent consultant. You might have a gap or two, a little time before you roll off one project and start another. And that did happen to me when we were living out in the suburbs. It was super stressful. Right. Not even just from a financial point of view, just from an emotional point of view. The stress of feeling like you got to hustle and hustle and hustle to find your next job.
Well, you're still doing that with what you're doing with Payball. So I'm going to fast forward a few years. because I think what Payball Sports is doing is really interesting, and I really want to talk about that. So about 5 years ago, you shared you had a light bulb moment for your side hustle, which is called Payball. Can you just explain to us what it is and what you do?
Sure. So do you want the backstory of Payball, or you want me to come back to that?
No, yeah, especially I like your backstory.
So I'll try to give you the colorful version. So going back to my wife and I, again, we played sports in college, right? So we kind of are athletic minded and interested in sports, of course. And when we started raising our young family, as you can imagine, our kids were fairly involved with sports too. And we volunteered in all of those. So I've coached both my daughter and my son in everything from soccer, basketball, lacrosse, obviously, flag football, you name it, whatever they were interested in. I wanted to be part of that. My father did that for me, and I loved it. And I wanted to kind of continue that cycle. My daughter, when she was in kindergarten, got interested in lacrosse, and in our town, Norwalk, Connecticut, there was nothing available at that age. So my wife and I we went to the organization, the town lacrosse league, and said, we want to start a program for the little peewees, for the girls. So we started this thing called Little Laxers, and it's still going strong today. That got me involved in the program, in the town program, and I stayed on the board. I got on the board in the next year or two and was on the board for the next 10 years. I think I just rolled off this last winter, right? Finally kind of said my kids have aged out, and so I'm aging out. Not time for the next crew to come in. So 5 years ago, let's say, I was running the girls program while also coaching my son's team. And one of my responsibilities for running the girls program was making sure that the refs for our games got paid at game time. And the way we always do is you pay out the field with cash. I got indoctrinated into this process of using cash to pay our refs, and it was just a disaster from my side. So here I am, coming from a career of being obsessed about efficiency, streamlining, squashing all that, and making things squashing all inefficiencies and getting as easy and straightforward as possible. And I got into this world of massive inefficiency and high risk of taking wads of cash and handing it around to tons of all the coaches to say, here's your cash to pay the refs for that game. Here's your cash. We'll meet again next week, maybe in the parking lot of Walmart to go give you your next bulk of cash for the next week's games. And we had no way of really tracking it. It just pressed all my buttons, saying this is a terrible way of doing things. I can't believe we're not embracing technology, because there must be a solution out there with all the peer-to-peer payment solutions that we have. That somebody must have figured this out. We just haven't gotten to it yet. So that sent me shopping. At that point, I still hadn't had a light bulb moment for Payball. I just figured that there must be something like that already out there. I'll shrink the story down to, I went looking around. I talked to hundreds of people around the country, my peer network, right? Friends and family, to say, figuring out who's done what. What I got back, the unanimous feedback was always, we don't have anything. We're doing either cash or check. And the process is kind of the similar process, and the pain points are the similar pain points. And that became a light bulb moment for me. I said, hold on, I saw one or two technical solutions out there that are still there. They're my competitors today. But my sense from trying to use them was that, wow, this is terrible. I would never want to use this. So I can envision something that is a very simplistic, streamlined utility app for using mobile payments, right? So you're at the field, and instead of doing cash, I'm a coach. I can go into an app. I can find the ref that's standing next to me, just find your name, hit send payment, and they get a buzz right on their phone. They say, thank you, I accept the payment, and they both walk away knowing the transaction is complete. Right? And now the funds are going to get sent electronically. So that's the idea of the app, and that set me on my path. 5 years later, we now have about 150 organizations all throughout the country using it. Every sport, pretty much, aging from little peewee leagues, town leagues, all the way up to the Women's Professional Lacrosse League as a pro league, for example. Well, unfortunately, I don't know if you're. Unfortunately, they just folded like a week or two ago. They just made the announcement, unfortunately. So I don't know for sure. I'm sure that didn't help. They were going to have a summer season, but they couldn't pull it off, and I'm guessing that was maybe the nail in the coffin. I don't know.
That's so sad.
Yeah.
So obviously you didn't just think of an idea and have an app the next day and have a bunch of clients. And I feel like the easiest part, yeah, right. I feel like the easiest part is just, thinking of the idea in a sense. In some ways it's also the hardest part, but how did you turn this idea into reality? How did you find the right people to design this app for you, and make it the way that it is today?
No, and you're right, by the way, just to harp on that for a second. The idea, that's like it's a saying that you hear all the time in like the startup world too, is like, look, their ideas are a dime a dozen, right? Everybody's got great ideas, but it is in the execution. And that's what I learned too. It really is. I mean, taking an idea and then actually making it happen is the hard part for sure. I did a lot of research. So that 100 people I was talking about, I reached out to, I circled back to them too. I really, I was doing this later in my career. I have more, I'm less risky, right? More risk adverse.
Right.
I have a mortgage. I have college that I have to pay for my kids coming up soon. It's like, I just couldn't, just throw caution to the wind and just say, I'm going to throw myself out there. So I did do a lot of research just to convince myself that it really is a viable solution, right? That there is a demand, there is potential, and there's a good enough market size to make sure there's a product market fit and enough market to make it worthwhile, right? Once I convinced myself of that, I sought out an investor, got an investor he's still with me. He's fantastic. And then my career, my profession always been related to software development. So I kind of know that world a bit so I was comfortable with going shopping for a firm that I can hire to develop the actual app. So I did the design. I did like what they call the wireframes, kind of like mocking up, here's what I think the screens should look like and what the user should do when they're in there, click here, it takes you to this and how it should work. Right. But that was like a spec that I can give to a firm to go ahead and actually build the thing.
How did you go about finding investors? And I'm sure like you're in that world kind of, but how does that work?
I got lucky, really. So I put together like a pitch deck, right? And that was one of the more daunting things. That was right at the beginning. I didn't know what was what. I didn't go get my MBA, and where they do that with you, right? Where that's where you kind of come out learning how to do that kind of stuff. So that was very daunting in it, and I really relied on some friends and just people in my network who helped me along the way to coach me and encourage. And one of the most poignant ones was somebody who had a local person who had opened up a coffee shop here. And she walked me through saying, she had a great pedigree of, been to the top business schools and everything. And she said, you need like 10 pages. People talk about like a book of what you have to do for your business plan. She's like, you need like 10 or 12 slides and you're doing more, you're wasting your energy. And it was that was a huge relief. So anyway, I created a deck, all prepared to kind of shop it around. And in fact, I have a cousin who is a very successful business person. And I went to him for looking at my deck to kind of say, help me out, to tweak it, etc. He ended up becoming my investor. He helped me with the pitch deck. And then, he had me pitch to him and he says, I'm going to make this really easy for you. You don't have to go looking for other investors. He's like, I'll be your investor, which was
wow.
A game changer. So I got really lucky with that. I recognize that that's a lot of luck, right? I didn't have to go, there are plenty of people who have to go 6 months to a year pitching it all over the place and spending a lot of money traveling to go do that and hearing no all the time. I didn't have to experience that pain right up front. I got plenty of no's after, but from other people, but that was a great, really lowering of a barrier for me.
Right. Oh, I'm sure. That's really cool. And you told us a little bit about the clients and how it kind of ranges from, peewees all the way up to what was the professional women's team or league. But who are some of your dream clients that you would love Payball to work with?
Well, one of my dream clients that is working with Payball, which is really I'm very excited about, is the IMG Academy. I don't know if you know them, but they're pretty famous. All the big tennis players have come through them. So they're a client. I mean, I mentioned the women's professional lacrosse league. I would love the men's, the PLL, which just finished their season. They did a bubble, right, and had a very successful season. I would love for them to do it. And frankly, that's the lacrosse world. As much as I'm passionate about lacrosse, it's not the soccer world. So I'd love to be in your world, and I would love to get soccer organizations. I would love to get, there are lots of big soccer clubs around the country. There are a lot of big tournament management companies around the country, which are our big clients, or actually big prospects. And then sports facilities, right? They're playing sports facilities, sorry, that, just have, 7 days a week, just games pumping through them and organizations pumping through them. So that's another big target market for us. And then of course, any professional league.
Right. Was there, going back a little bit to the app itself, was there any initial hiccups that you guys ran into, or did everyone take this app and be like, wow, this is amazing?
I can't say there were any like hiccups, like technical kind of stuff where people are like, ooh, there's a bug, or it wasn't designed right and there was confusion or anything like that. I mean,
right.
There's certainly plenty of that kind of issue in any software where you're always looking to improve. So we've never stopped rebuilding, tweaking, trying to make it as simple as possible for everybody. The way I'd answer that, though, I think one of the surprises I did have, and it still sticks with us, is, I think I incorrectly assumed that this was so simple and so narrowly focused. And, people a lot of times say, oh, this is kind of like Venmo for sports. I mean, I feel like everybody now, this is 5 years ago, not everybody knew Venmo. Everybody knows Venmo now. That was the same mindset. Like, this is so simple. You don't really need a whole lot of coaching and understand. Like, you need to hear about it. From hearing about it, you can go look at it yourself. You look at it yourself, like, great, I'm going to sign up. And that's kind of what happens with Venmo, right? You don't need a salesperson to call you and pitch Venmo to you because you heard about it from somebody you looked at. It's like, I get it. I'm comfortable with it. I'll just sign up myself. That was kind of what I envisioned would happen with Payball. What I didn't give enough credit to was with something like Venmo, you're making a decision for you and you alone, right? It's an individual decision. With Payball, you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it for an organization that you represent. And so right away, there are multiple people that have to get involved in that decision. Mm-hmm. And once that happens, it gets more challenging. And there needs to be a little bit more discussion, and there might need a little bit more facilitation from Payball side to help that discussion. So that was one thing I didn't give enough credit to. And again, I'm thrilled that we have 150 organizations. The reality is I'd love to have 150,000 organizations, which is, I think, like many entrepreneurs, I think when they're starting out somewhat naively, assume like by this point, 5 years later, 4 years later, that's where we would be. Right. If you get, it catches on. It's still the dream, but
oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's a really unique app in the sense, like you said, it kind of in a way replaces Venmo, but it's so sports focused, and I'm sure there's other things that you probably have in mind to add to the app to make it more desirable as well.
Yeah, and I mean, then that comes up quite a bit, and people compare it to Venmo, an app like Venmo, and there are definitely some significantly different features that you get through Payball that you don't get through Venmo. That I won't dive into that in this call, but it's on our website, etc. But there are definitely some sports centric things that you need in order to have things like 10 of your coaches be able to make payments on behalf of the organization, right? Which you can't really do that in the Venmo type of app, right? Which that's what Payball gives. It's very powerful to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. So you're also working your other IT consultant job. You balance both Payball and your other career, which is probably really difficult, but add on top, you own one of the businesses and it is your side hustle. Have you found a balance? And if so, how have you balanced both careers?
There's no balance. Anybody's doing a side hustle, usually it's challenging. There's no way around it. It's a lot of burning the wick at both ends. But what offsets that is it's a passion, right? So the reality is when I'm doing stuff for Payball, often I don't feel like I'm working. I'll be doing stuff on the weekends. I've just had a full work week. I'll do stuff on the weekends. I do things at night or in the early morning sometimes, but it never quite feels like work because it's such a passion project for me, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, it's not, and I will say, it's certainly nicely at this point, the business model is kind of self-propelling, where certainly in the early days, in the first couple of years, there was a lot more hustling, right? Or just to establish that client base, for example, just to kind of get the momentum. Now that there's momentum, it definitely is not requiring quite as much intense time.
So a lot of times people talk about starting their careers or starting their side hustles early on in their career, so they have more time to build their brand and figure out, where it's going to go. And that may be true in a lot of cases, but in your case, you started this after you've worked for several years. So how has your wisdom and your experience in the real world helped you with Payball?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I recognize that I'm a little unique in the entrepreneurial world, where usually people are quite a bit younger to get started. It really, I will say, it has helped in some regards. I think maybe just in confidence, and probably false confidence. Because I was thinking, I've thought about this different times. Or it's come up. Other people have asked me that, and I think I just personally have more confidence knowing that, I've seen a lot more now in my career. I feel more established. I have been exposed to different scenarios that I wouldn't have if, let's say, it was 20 years ago, 15 years ago. That said, I will say the things that that have been, so much has been new learnings, right? Everything, I feel like every corner I turn with Payball, there's something new to learn, which has been one of the things that I love about it. One of the challenges, but also one of the things I love about it that keeps me going. And I would say that the things that I am learning along the way, or that I don't know, I wouldn't have known, well, what's the right way of saying this? I wouldn't have been any better off when I was younger, and I wouldn't have been any worse off when I was younger. It's like, it doesn't matter what time in my life I would face this concept of a startup. There's so much that I'm learning that, it's brand new now. It would have been brand new then. And so the fact that I think I have more confidence is just probably a personal, emotional thing, as opposed to I really needed that extra tenure in my career to actually do better.
What are some of the things that you've learned?
In doing Payball?
Yes.
I've never done sales before this. So doing that process, talking to people, learning how to even network, to find people who might be a good fit to talk to, has been a tremendous learning curve, which has been really cool. And then on that other side of the process, when actually doing the sales, and there's no question about it, you hear no way more than you hear less. That's been challenging, right? Again, I haven't been in that world. I don't think I'm necessarily, my DNA isn't necessarily wired for that. There are a lot of salespeople out there that are phenomenal, and it just doesn't affect them. It definitely affects me. But you do definitely also at the same time develop a thicker skin, and you do start learning to, they say, never take no for an answer. I don't know if I'd say it that extreme, but you do start, seeing the world, it almost forces you to start seeing the world in a positive way at all times. I feel like that's something that a salesperson has to do, because you have to see the positive in something. You have to see the opportunity in something. And it's been really interesting. I've even noticed it myself. I've been applying that to just outside of Payball, just to life. There are times where something might get you frustrated or down because there's a challenge or there's a disappointment. And it's becoming more natural. You're always looking for that positive spin, that positive lens to look at it through and look for an opportunity, which has been really a nice byproduct that I didn't know I would have.
I feel like nowadays in every career, you kind of have to have that. So
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I have and I think we'll probably get into this. I don't want to get out of order or anything, but I'm doing this internship program now with Payball, which has been phenomenal. So again, we can come back to that. But it's one of the things I've been talking to the interns about as well, because using my own personal learning. Again, I'm not a professional salesperson that's been doing this for their entire career for 20 years and is a keynote speaker about sales, right? But I've been trying to relay some of those personal learnings to them who are now experiencing for the first time too.
Right. That's where we're headed next. COVID-19 has really changed a lot of things for everyone, and especially students who just, their internships fall through. And man, if I think back to college, the things that I learned from my internships and the people that I've met, the experiences that I had, that's so sad that they're just not going to have that. But with Payball, you were able to get creative with things and help out some kids that lost their internships due to COVID-19. Can you kind of tell us about your internship program?
So I would love to talk about my internship program, actually. It's probably one of the things I'm most proud of, and I've had the most fun doing in the last 4 or 5 years when it comes to Payball. I did not expect that, but it's been really fantastic. It's kind of energizing. And maybe it is just because I'm hanging out with a bunch of college kids and it's keeping me young. I don't know. But if I go back a little bit, when I first started Payball, I kind of always had a vision of doing something like this. I just never made it happen. So I always knew that I would need help with sales, right? I'm on my own. This Payball is just me, really, right? a solo entrepreneur. So I knew I would need help with people, right, to do sales, but it's also a challenge of, you're a bootstrap startup. You can't hire 20 people and pay them a salary to go around the country selling. So I always had this vision of having an internship program specifically for college student athletes, right? And the idea being there's so much synergy there, right? So they're sports people. They already understand sports. They're already obviously passionate about sports, and they know the network. They know the world, that like sports market world. The network piece of it is really critical too, right? So any student athlete is somewhat of a celebrity in their own hometown, right? They had some tremendous success through sports, and every town enjoys that, right? And supports those athletes that rise up, in any regard. They have some success in their college, so they're also known there too. So it was this kind of perfect equation of, here's a person who's got a lot of innate skills that I would want in a salesperson anyway. They know the industry, so you check that box. And they already come with a network that they probably don't even realize they have, right? And wouldn't that be a great thing to leverage? So the concept was always there. It was always going to be remote. It was always going to be virtual. I just frankly never got it off the ground. And I think a big part of that was, if you think about it, I get internships, like you said, they're key, right? They're key to me. They're key to any person that's looking to get career minded, and they're, let's say, going into their junior year, going into their senior year for sure. Many of the people, if they're going to compare doing that job that I just described to like a corporate experience in a blue chip company, chances are they're not going to necessarily say, I'd rather do the Payball thing when I have some JP Morgan that wants to hire me for their internship program. So that was always a bit of a barrier, saying, I don't know if there's that much of an appetite for it. So fast forward, here comes COVID. I sat there watching as the spring season just collapsed, right, for all the spring athletes. And then I watched as they had to come home from school. And then I saw, and I have a bunch of like people from my community where they're student athletes coming back home. So I saw this firsthand, right? Then I saw their internships evaporate. And that was the moment where it was really heartbreaking to see the whole thing. And I could relate to it, obviously, right? Having done sports myself in college. So it was already heartbreaking to see everything else collapse. And then realizing that, oh my goodness, your kind of critical summer internship that you already had lined up, because congratulations, you did a great job being proactive about that. Oh, that just evaporated too, with nothing that you can control. So, really there's a kind of a couple things in play at once. One, I wanted to help. I wanted to see if there's something that we could do to help offset this. And I, pretty quickly, in the matter of like a conversation, I actually happen to be good friends with the people across the street from us. And there's a college student athlete who's dating their daughter, right? I won't give names, right? But in a conversation with them, it just all came together. I mentioned it and saying, oh my goodness, that'd be great. Like they each had friends that were, just scrambling to find something, anything, any kind of job, and in their local towns, right? Whether it's like physical labor or something else, being a receptionist somewhere, who knows? So again, a little bit of a light bulb moment, saying, oh wow, that concept I always had might be perfect. And this gives all these student athletes who are missing anything a way to salvage an internship opportunity, right? So working for Payball in this job I described, it checks a lot of boxes for a true business experience, right? That is meaningful for when they're looking for their next job. So everything, it's a fintech company, so financial technology company. It's sports management, it's sports technology, it's startup, it's sales, it's business development. Like all those components are truly embedded in this job. And they get to now have that as something to build their resume, something to actually gain real meaningful experience that they can take with them when they go onto their true careers. So in a matter of like a week or two, I spun up, the job descriptions, posted it online, and I mean, within a week after that, got flooded with student athletes who were interested. And now I have I think there's 25 of them. About 20 of them are business development, like sales type of roles. So their job is essentially, use your personal network. And I'm teaching them networking skills as well to kind of broaden that network even further, to go educate people about Payball and what it is and what it can offer. And one of the pivots that now all of a sudden Payball has is playing this role in the COVID world, right? Paperless payments are kind of critical, right? Contactless payments. All these organizations, like I said, are using cash or check today, or have been. I would hope that as they're looking to get back to sports, that they're not considering to do that still, right? I'm hoping that everybody's looking for a way to get contactless, and I'd like Payball to be able to play that role, to be able to help do that, right? So that's the bulk of the interns are doing that. And then I have 5 interns who were more interested in doing marketing and social media marketing. And that's been really fun for me because I've gotten to collaborate with them and use their energy and their creativity to think of new ways of actually getting the word out. And between all of them, we have a weekly call. One of the things I've told them, this is not a 40-hour a week punch in, punch out, office job. It's like one of the beauties of this is you do it at your schedule, right? You do it what works for you, how much time works for you. The incentive is there to earn a commission if you get an organization to sign up. So you're self-motivated, but then it's on you to organize your time. And if you want to have another job as well to supplement that too, great. We can be flexible. So the flexibility, I think, was kind of key for a lot of these student athletes. And it's worked out great. So we do have a group meeting once a week to kind of make sure we're all together, and we use it as opportunities to learn from each other on what's happened in the last week, who's had what experiences, good or bad, and we talk about it. Many of them have actually said they want to continue on through the school year, which is also great. I didn't expect that, but again, I think they're enjoying it too. I hope they're being honest about that. I don't know if they're enjoying it as much as I am, but I'm definitely loving it. I was thrilled to hear that they want to continue doing this.
Yeah, and I'm sure for them too, it's just great to have something that they could work on from home and like you said, put on their resume. But has this kind of made you think maybe you want to bring more people on board once this is over?
I absolutely would. I mean, I would love to, if we had 25 people, I'd love to see that double, triple, et cetera. The model works really well, right? It's kind of like self-sustaining. So I would love to broaden that out. And I think we might be taking steps in the next couple of weeks to start putting that out there to let other college student athletes know this is an option. There's an opportunity out there. You can do it during the school year. It's only I think most of them are saying they're spending, 3-4 hours a week, doing this, doing the effort. So it makes it very reasonable to actually continue.
That's cool. Is there any unique value that Payball has gotten from the internship program besides just, helping with marketing and helping with sales?
I think the energy. What it is actually, it's very selfishly personal, emotional. I grew up around team sports. That's what makes me tick, right? In fact, when I interview for jobs and I talk about, many athletes will talk about their sports and how it's impacted them, et cetera. I always harp on the idea, God bless the individual sports, right? And great, right? And any sport, play anything. I'm a fan. I'm a supporter, huge supporter, right? But the thing that throughout my life that's always made me tick is team sports. And I recognize that maybe with some maturity and hindsight and looking back and self-reflection, like what it is. I love collaborating with others, right? I love the chemistry that you do, that happens when you have a common goal and you act as a team, right? And that to me is a daily presence in my corporate life. So this team is filling that void that I've had through Payball. It's been very lonely, right? That's one of the bigger challenges I've had with Payball is it's very lonely because I've been, a solo entrepreneur. And I don't have a team at a company. They've become my team. So I love that. Yeah,
that's really cool. And in a way, you're also a mentor to them as well. Everyone needs.
I try to be. Yeah, I try to be. I hope so. And, I hope that, even those who do need to roll off because they want to concentrate on their studies, which I applaud as well. I hope they'll look to me to be, somebody they can come back to for mentoring, tips, helping to network. Mm-hmm. I really get a lot out of that. I enjoy that.
Do you have any Penn Staters in the program?
I do. Actually, so Bobby Burns, shout out to Bobby. So Bobby is actually my official mentee through the Penn State Teammates for Life mentorship program. So I've known Bobby now since he was a freshman. We kind of got matched up through the program. And the concept is that, we keep touch loosely, it's kind of, you figure out the right balance of we're not here to be a burden, but, I'm here as a resource if you ever want to talk, if you ever want, advice on anything. And then it does, as you get kind of through your college career, it gets more and more focused on career placement, where we recognize as alumni and people that are now established in the corporate world that we have something to give and to offer to help with that, right? Everything from helping with your resume, giving advice, and then helping certainly with networking and job placement. So Bobby and I have had a rolling dialogue for several years now. And when this came up, of course, he was one of the first people I turned to saying, "Are you interested?" And he said, "Yeah." So he joined. A few of his friends from home who are also college student athletes are on the team now too. And that's been really nice because I feel like we've had a strong relationship where we keep in touch. And I see, if I go to games, we'll see each other afterwards at the tailgate or something. Mm-hmm. This has actually totally escalated it and amplified that, I felt much closer to him, which is really nice.
I love that mentorship program that the lacrosse team has. And that's such a cool way for you to still be involved with the team. I wish more teams kind of had that program. But I'm interested to kind of hear, how did that get started?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm so impressed. I'm only like a pawn in the whole thing. I'm a mentor to somebody, right? And I hope when Bobby graduates, I'll continue doing it for the next person that comes in and the next player. But I got to give a lot of credit, and actually the credit goes to, primarily three people in my mind. So one of them is my brother, Rich, who I mentioned earlier. He was a business student at Smeal College of Business, like I was. Another guy that was not his teammate, a little bit older, Gary Martin, also one of the all-time greats coming out of Penn State lacrosse. So they partnered up. And sorry, Gary, I think also was probably a Smeal College of Business. So Rich and Gary partnered up with Coach Tambroni. So Jeff Tambroni is the third person I got to give credit for. So I think those three gelled and created this vision of, I think, Gary and Rich coming to Coach Tambroni saying, Smeal College of Business does a really fantastic job of alumni network, organization. And they kind of picked that model and proposed to do the same thing for the teammates, what we call the Teammates for Life program now. They launched it, I want to say somewhere around 5 years ago, give or take. Don't hold me to that, but maybe a year or two more than that. And it just took off. Right? I think you're in that boat now too, right? It's like, as an alumni, you want to stay connected, you want to help, right? But that's it would take a pretty special person to just do that on your own motivation. This organization gives you that structure and that forum to be able to do it in a meaningful way. So they're great. I mean, we have a couple of different events that we do throughout the year. We as the mentors have a couple of forums to kind of collaborate and share ideas and who's come across this that works and who's challenged here. When we have, somebody knows of a new job opening that might be interested to some of the players, we get the word out to the alumni network, who then spreads that word down to their mentee. It's become a really powerful thing. And again, now kind of self-sustaining, with a lot of help and guidance from those three people I just mentioned. And I think everybody's involved and found it really helpful and really beneficial. What we hear, at least, is even from the players, they find it to be a great way of connecting to a dynasty, right? It's like, you're no longer just there for your 4 years. You're now part of this thing, right? And I think we all feel, we get a little goosebumps when we're together. It's like, wow, this is really cool. I'm seeing a guy that played 20 years before me and somebody that's playing now 20 years after. And we're all part of this continuum, and we're all part of this same organism. It's really powerful.
Yeah. And I mean, just, and like you said, not just, for their career, but also just in life, having somebody you can relate with. You guys play the same sport. In a lot of ways, you're probably a lot of the same person. I just think that's really cool. And a lot of people should kind of like mold off of that in a way and take it.
I agree. If you ever want to brainstorm, I'm happy to brainstorm on for soccer.
Yeah. So, I mean, also Big Ten sports, that's the huge conversation that everyone's having now, not just Big Ten, but we're talking Big Ten just because of Penn State, but just so many leagues or conferences are deciding to stop fall sports and head over to the spring. But you were a captain before. If you were a captain on the lacrosse team now, obviously lacrosse is a spring sport, but lacrosse will be affected by this, just like every other sport will be. How would you manage that for yourself and for your teammates?
Yeah, there's no great answer. It's so hard. Yeah. It's heartbreaking to see this happen. I mean, even for the non-athletes, even for students going to these schools, that's such a part of the expected culture, right? There's no way getting around the fact that this sucks.
Yeah.
I'll kind of go back to as far as, if it was me in their shoes right now, how would I cope? How would I handle it with my teammates? There's not a tremendous, amount of silver bullet ideas of what to do. But I think I'd go back to one of the things I said earlier in the conversation. At the end of the day, the lacrosse experience I had, what I remember is the relationships. It's my friends. I loved playing. I loved all the other tangible things you do. But it was really about doing that. That was like a vehicle to be with my friends, right? So if you take out the tangible things to do, you still have your friends, right? And so I think it just comes down to, use it as, I've been telling some people, even aside from athletes, like, try to find a way to like flip this on its head, right? And look at it as, again, look at this, maybe I didn't even think about this. Maybe it's this whole sales mentality thing. I'm looking for that opportunity to never kind of give up, right? So I keep telling people, flip it on its head, like, you have now a really unique opportunity to have a semester, let's say this fall semester, to do something you never would have had that opportunity to do it if you were at school playing sports in the normal equation, right? What can you do with that, right? My nephew is thinking that he goes to Lafayette. He's thinking about, renting a house out in Colorado with a few of his roommates because they have to take classes virtually. It's like, that's fantastic, right? Go think of something, it doesn't have to be that extreme even, right? But like, think of something that you can do that you wouldn't have done if you had an interest that you would love to do at school that you would never have the time to because you're not allowed to, right? I don't know, maybe you can go do this other club activity for a semester. Who knows? So yeah, it's just like, looking for those opportunities of where can you grab little wins, where can you kind of redefine it and take control of your environment when so much is out of your control.
I didn't even think about that. You're so right. I mean, my personal story, I played 2 years of soccer and then I decided that my career is something I really wanted to focus on and I wanted to move away. And I still played club soccer, but for me, it was so sad when I had to leave because obviously the girls were still there. I still lived with them, but I was like, I'm going to use this opportunity to get involved in, thon. I was heavily involved in that. I was really involved in my major. And yeah, like you said, there's so many things that these universities have to offer that student athletes, a lot of the time, just pigeonhole them into a friend group and into their sport because it's so easy. It's right there and it could take up a lot of your time. But I just think there's, especially Penn State, I mean, of course, there's just so much to offer that sometimes I would see some of my peers and be like, man, like, try and branch out a little bit and see what other things you can get involved with. And like you said, I think this is such a good opportunity for those students to do that now because it'll never happen again.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to go explore yourself, explore what your interests are, like find and figure out what those others are. I didn't figure that out until after I left school, right? My semester abroad that I mentioned before, because it was my 4.5 semester.
Yeah.
That was life-changing for me. I mean, I became a different person from going abroad and exploring this new side of me that wasn't based in, every day there's 3 hours of practice, there's this regimen. This is a whole new opportunity. And, that's an extreme, but, I agree. Like, what can you do to explore your other interests? Because, the reality is in a couple of years when you're out of college, you're going to have to face that anyway.
Yes.
Right? What a nice, obviously, look at this as a little gift of time rather than a curse.
Right.
And take that with a grain of salt. I wouldn't want to be doing it either, but you got to find something to make yourself sane.
Yeah. And I mean, besides, the few people who go pro in their sports, you're going to be joining the real world, just like all your other all your other peers at the school. So you might as well get a head start in your career and just figure out what that'll look like for you next. But yeah,
I've been preaching to every student I know, is a college student I know is going back to colleges now or thinking about trying to grapple with, do I go back or do I not because we're virtual or whatever. I've been preaching to everyone that they should go live in the Caribbean, go live in South America, go somewhere and take your classes virtually because you don't have to do it right here. It's easy to say from the sidelines, but do something radical, right?
Especially when you're a broke student in college, you probably don't have all the money in the world to travel, but go into some debt, buy a few credit cards, get a few credit cards.
Right.
Never know.
But you're going to have a great story to tell,
Exactly. What a year it's been. So my last question is, what is next for P and for Payball?
I kind of mentioned this before. not looking too far in the future, but I'm hopeful that, as sports come back, right? It's in the news on a daily basis, and then, you feel it, you hear it around friends and family, around the community. Everybody's trying to figure out, how do we get back to sports safely? I am hopeful that Payball will play a very positive role in that, right? I really do. People are going to be thinking about masks, social distancing, health and safety, as they absolutely should. And that's the priority when you're talking about sports coming back. A lot of that gets undermined if you go, at the end of the day, do that, and then somebody's fishing some sweaty bills out of their pocket to hand it to somebody else to pay, right? So, and that's not going to necessarily be top of mind compared to the other stuff, but I'm hoping that people will start catching on that and realizing that, paper payments are a thing of the past, whether it was they're going to age out anyway versus now all of a sudden it's a health and safety concern. So I'm hopeful that in the next 6 months to a year that Payball is in this position to be able to play a role in that, not just from a commercial financial standpoint, but just really, look, this has been a side hustle. I'm not retiring on this. So the reason I'm doing a lot of this is just out of personal fulfillment and scratching an itch that I've had for decades. I certainly hope that it becomes something huge, right? Don't get me wrong. But I guess what I'm trying to get to is, I'm hoping that it can play that role, not just from a commercial standpoint, but really just from a sense of we were able to help, right? We were able to do this thing that for the greater good that actually is a really nice byproduct that I never would have envisioned 4 years ago, right? And now all of a sudden we put ourselves in the right place at the right time, and hopefully people find us.
Yeah. And a lot of very successful businesses start from a genuine passion, not just a forced, oh, this is a good idea, I need to do it.
Yeah.
So where can everyone find you online and on social media?
So our website is www.payballsports.com. So that one's simple. And then we are on all of the major platforms except for TikTok. We're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I believe the handle for all of them is the same as, Payball app, as in short for application. So Payball app everywhere.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Pete. It was so great to get to know you and just what you're doing and with Payball. Super encouraging, and best of luck moving forward.
Thanks so much, Anna. I appreciate the opportunity. It was great to be able to connect and get to know you a little bit as well through this process. So I really do appreciate it. I wish the same to you. And I've listened to some of your other podcasts. I listened to the entire thing. They were engaging. So thank you for doing this. And I wish the best of luck to you. And hopefully we keep in touch.